members, members present and members on Zoom. It's great to see members on Zoom. And Dinah, nice to see you. We have a new member on Zoom. Yay! Okay. All right, so the way the meeting is going to go is I'm going to introduce the timer, who's Warren. Warren, why don't you give us a quick overview of the timing?
Fellow Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. So at the beginning of the low end of the time, I'll show the green card. At the middle, I'll show the yellow card. At the end, I'll show the red card. And I'll show the stop sign 30 seconds after the highest card. So at the end of the meeting, I'll provide the report of times for the different speeches. Thank you.
And tonight, we're going to have Allen Supynuk is the facilitator. Speaker 1 is Bruce Paolozzi. Speaker 2 is Barbara Seymour, and Speaker 3 is a guest speaker who I invited, who's Kristen Culver. And in between, you're going to have workshop, breakout rooms. Alan's going to give a succinct template of a really good evaluation, and then we're all going to work together and have some group evaluations and so forth. And I know that if you can't hear us on Zoom or something's amiss, please flag us down because we're in an impromptu setting tonight. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing one of our own members, Allen Supynuk. He's a DTM, and Allen has given over 500 speeches in his first 5 years as a Toastmaster. But he's been in Toastmasters much longer than that. And on top of that, he's given over 1,000, imagine, 1,000 speech evaluations. However, since that time, he has slowed down his pace a little bit, but he's closing in on his next group of another 1,000 evaluations. Allen has been a member of 4 different advanced Toastmasters clubs, including sponsoring what was probably the only private advanced club in Toastmasters history. If anyone doesn't know about advanced clubs, they almost 100% give group evaluations for every one of their speeches. And today that's what we're going to be practicing as well. Please welcome our very own Allen Supynuk.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to start out with a very short vignette about why evaluations make a difference. I'm going to talk about the most significant evaluation I ever experienced in my time as a Toastmaster. Wasn't one that I gave. I was a Toastmaster member in a prison club, a women's prison club at the Framingham Women's Prison, which has since closed down. And we had a very active club there. About 1/3 of the inmates there were members at the peak. And the average person there was probably not as accomplished a speaker as the average person here. Background was all over the map. Many of them had horrible histories growing up. A lot of them had been mentally abused their whole lives, low self-esteem. And one night we talked a woman into giving her icebreaker speech. And she didn't really want to do it, but we pushed her fairly hard, and she got up. She gave this rambling 12 to 15 minute long icebreaker. And she started off chronologically, and then she jumped forward and she jumped back and she jumped forward and she jumped back. And eventually she finished. So we finished all the speeches and we got to the point where there were evaluations. and we dropped the ball. We hadn't assigned her an evaluator. And I thought, oh my God, first icebreaker speech, someone were encouraging to get there, and when do we have an evaluator? And one of the guys that was helping me run the club put up his hand and said, oh, I was hoping I could do evaluation. Will you please let me do it? And he did. And I was sitting behind her. I was in the back of the room, and I watched her. And she started out, you know, I could just imagine all the feedback she's gotten in her life. Not a lot of it was positive. So she's sitting there kind of slouched down, thinking, oh, rambling, incoherent speech. I'm just going to get lambasted. I'm going to yet another person going to tell me how lousy I am. And he went on. He gave a 6 or 7 minute evaluation, and he found 20 or 30 positive things to say. And by the time he got to number 6 or number 7, she started to sit up in her chair. By the time he got to number 12, she was sitting up ramrod straight, and she had the biggest smile. I could, sitting behind her, I could see that she was smiling. And she stayed sitting up and stayed smiling for the rest of that meeting, and she went on to become one of our most active members. Her life was transformed by one speech evaluation. So if you've been giving speech evaluations for a while and you think you're good, how many people's lives have you changed with your evaluations? You can do that. And ask me at the end of the meeting, because this stuff transfers to more than just Toastmasters. Now in Toastmasters, we often do what we call the Oreo cookie method. And I've got some things. The actual Oreo brand is have them out of stock right at the moment. But can you please take one of these and pass them on? Jonathan, can you take that and pass them? So this is an Oreo cookie, but it's a little different than regular Oreo cookie. The 2 sides are different colors, right? And this is the Oreo cookie I want you to have in your mind when you do an evaluation. Because we say positive things, constructive things that maybe need a little bit of sweetener, and then we say positive things at the end. So we say positive things at the beginning and the end, but the things we say at the beginning are not the same kind of thing that we say at the end. And please take a cookie whether you're going to eat one or not. You can throw it out if you don't, but keep this in. And virtual cookies to all of you guys on Zoom. So what are the 3 parts? What's the first part? Positive things. So I would say 3 to 5 positive things. That's your rule of thumb. You adjust depending on, 2 really, really good ones is fine, but 3 to 5. But when I talked about, he gave like 17 to 20. Went over time as well, but okay. What's the middle layer? Constructive. Okay. And you really want to think about that. It's got to be something actionable, something that can act on, just like, oh, you should check your facts. Well, no. No fact checking in Toastmasters. We don't care about the facts here. All right. You give a speech, you want to keep on going. Yes, I was sitting there facing west in the sun as the sun came up. And the sky was a beautiful shade of green. Doesn't matter. It's a Toastmaster speech. We're looking at the form of the speech, not the content. And the last thing you want to do is talk about what's the last layer. Yeah. Try to encourage them to give the next speech. And as a Toastmaster, I have a lot of people come up and say, why do we bother with the cookie layers? Every place else we go, we just give that constructive feedback. Constructive feedback, that's what's the most important. Why don't we just give the constructive feedback? I visited advanced clubs and they said, yes, we just give constructive feedback. We focus on that. And I say, thank you. I hope you enjoy your club. I'm never coming here again. Never coming there again. Let's put that on hold for a second. Why do we give just more than just constructive feedback? You notice how good people get in Toastmasters? The old program, I used to have 10 speeches, and I used to say, everyone, no matter where they start, by the time they get to their 10th speech, they give an excellent speech. Because I never heard a 10th speech was anything sort of excellent. And that's true. But after a while, I realized, you know, for most people, the third, fourth, or fifth speech is really, really good. So how does everyone get from wherever they start to really, really good in 3, 4 to 5 speeches? How does this work so well? And then I had an epiphany. It's that first layer. We sit there and tell somebody, here's all the things that you're doing right. And you hammer that home to them, make them receptive. They're thinking, oh, this person really gets me because they're seeing all the good things about me. And then you give 1 or 2 constructive things. And not only are they more receptive to your message, but also when they change those constructive things, they don't break one of those 3 to 5 things that you're already doing well. So instead of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it's 2 steps forward. So you start out thinking constructive criticism, that's the most important part of my evaluation. 2, what? Those 3 to 5 things you give at the beginning, that's the most important thing because that's what makes you go 2 steps forward. So out of the 3 layers, top layer is most important. And then I was in Toastmasters for a year. And in that year, I did close to 100 speeches, probably gave 200 evaluations. And one day, I had another epiphany. That third layer where you just kind of tack it on and you sort of say, look forward to your next speech, right? That's how we address it all the time. Well, if you think about it, if you tell them the best things they do and the most constructive things in the middle, and then they never give another speech, you have wasted your time. So I maintain out of the 3 things we're going to teach you tonight, that last one, the hardest one to articulate, is arguably the most important. What can you say to the person you're evaluating to make them rush home and start working on their next speech, whether it's redo those speech they just gave or start working on their next one? Right, let's just talk about the constructive, the good things. So when you're thinking about the good things, you can think about vocal variety, gestures, how they move their arms, how they move around the stage. You can talk about the format of their speech, about all the positive things you've heard of. But so we're going to have a speaker come up, and then we're just going to sit here and do a group evaluation, and we're going to write down things that we think we did well. Lisa, do you want to introduce our speaker?
Sure.
Welcome Lisa to the stage. Oh, this is a trick. You see, if you walk the stage, we have to applaud all the way till she gets here. So if you want more applause, just walk slowly on the way up to the stage.
Thank you very much, Alan. Let's give Alan another round of applause. Almost 2,000 evaluations under his belt and counting, huh? I have the privilege of introducing our first speaker, Bruce Paolozzi. Bruce is speaking out of the pathways called Presentation Mastery. It's a level 1 speech, evaluation and feedback, but it's the second part of his evaluation and feedback speech. Timer, it's a 5 to 7 minute speech. The title is Introduction to William James's essay, The Will to Believe. Bruce holds a PhD in philosophy of religion from Claremont Graduate University. Bruce also teaches a class at Assumption University, and he covers William James in detail about once a year. Let's give the stage up for Bruce.
Close your eyes for a second. Everybody, close your eyes.
think about an idea, some idea that's very important to you, something foundational to who you are. Now open your eyes. How many of you can say that that idea that you pictured is based on evidence, concrete evidence? Anybody? Anybody? Fellow Toastmasters, I am pleased to deliver an introduction to William James's essay, The Will to Believe. The Will to Believe is all about that exact scenario. Belief that is not supported by evidence and yet is perfectly rational. Who was William James? We'll start off with that. He's homegrown, okay? Homegrown. MD at Harvard, taught at Harvard, medicine, moved on to psychology, eventually into philosophy. Did a lot of work in philosophy of science. A lot of scientists love his pragmatic view of truth and his pragmatism as developed along with Dewey and Peirce. William James, he lived in the latter part of the 19th century, died in the early 20th century. And during his time, during his tenure when he was doing philosophy, there's this one dude, William Clifford, that really said something that got him going. William Clifford said, it is unethical, always, everywhere, and at all times to believe something on insufficient evidence. Let's hear that again. William Clifford said, it is morally wrong, ethically wrong to believe something anywhere, anytime on insufficient evidence. I said that twice because it's a doozy. If you think about it, there are a lot of issues here, a lot of ways that William James could come at this. For one thing, very simply, how many of you really analyzed your chairs to make sure there was ample evidence that would support your weight before you sat on your chairs? How many of you did that? Well, William Clifford would be appalled, I guess, that you sat down without sufficient evidence. But then again, there's also the very statement itself. How much evidence could a statement like that have in support of it? So there's this sort of self-refuting thing to it, which Karl Popper in the mid-20th century, he would glom onto that with some other dudes that he was dialoguing with, but that's a little rabbit trail. William James, irritated by Clifford, knows there's something wrong with Clifford's statement. He posits in The Will to Believe that us human beings are justified, and that's an important word when it comes to philosophy of knowledge, epistemology. That means you have a right, you have a justification to believe something, anything. So we are justified in certain beliefs based on our own human passions, Think about that, our passions. So what follows from this, in many cases, we're making passionate decisions about morality, right? About decisions for right and wrong. How many of those decisions are based on evidence? How much evidence is there for just the existence of right and wrong? It's something that really fits into the category. Another thing is art and beauty. I mean, look at this. This is artwork. This can be very beautiful. It can really hit you in the right scenario, right? But that's how much evidence is there for beauty, for art, for your judgments of art. So human passions were justified in making these decisions. But William James, he's a pragmatist. And a lot of his work really revolves around the scientific method. So how is somebody who really loves the scientific method going to get to this spot? Well, he knows that all of our human passion can go off the rails. So it can't only be human passion. How many of you know somebody who passionately made a wrong moral decision? I know, I look in the mirror every day, I see one. How many people have an opinion about some art piece that you think is absolutely hideous? So human passion can't be the only thing, or we'll go off the rails. We'll start attending the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which is a real thing, by the way. We'll start believing in Jewish space lasers and all sorts of things like that. So he has some rules, some rails for our passion, so to speak. 3 principles, which he talks about in depth in The Will to Believe. Those principles are that whatever it is has to be live, first of all. It has to be something, some concept that has some sort of appeal to you. It has to be live. It has to be forced. It has to be the type of choice where not making a choice is itself a choice. And finally, it has to be momentous. It has to be something that is going to change your life if you go ahead with it. The sort of belief that is life-changing. As I said at the beginning and in the title, this is an introduction to William James' Will to Believe. I have spoken on this topic for 2 hours, so I'm not going to spend 2 hours talking. I do hope that this has piqued your interest. His essay, The Will to Believe, is in public domain. If this has piqued your interest, I invite you to find it online and give it a read. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters. Nice job. Okay, let's just give kind of 1 minute. I just want you to each write down 3 things that you really liked about the speech. The first 3 things that come to mind. You can write down 4 or 5 if you want. I'm not going to check it. All right. I'd like each of you to throw out an idea. So if you've thrown one idea out, I want you to wait until everyone else is gone before you throw out a second one. Who wants to go first? Something you did really well.
He prompted the audience for responses to keep them engaged.
Yep. Ask questions. Great. My students used to tell me I should be a doctor writing prescriptions. Handwriting is that quality. Eddie, why don't you do it?
Actually, you repeated the question, which is very helpful.
Yes.
He also used the whole stage and had good body language.
Just go with use the stage, trying to sneak 2 of them in there. Put somebody from Zoom land. Someone?
So sorry, it's either Tracy or I. Tracy, you have Oreos, so I'll let you go.
I couldn't hear the first 2. Thanks, Dinah. I really love the way he pulled us in at the very beginning and asked us to close our eyes and get engaged with his speech.
Engage us early, yep. Great. Did I get you already, Aggie?
Yeah, I have another one.
Well, Lisa.
I liked Bruce's vocal variety because that again kept us tuned in and we didn't sort of stare off into space.
Aqua.
That's with a call of action.
Call to action, yes. Great way to, not appropriate for all speech, but great way to, nothing?
I thought he gave a really good introduction and explained what.
Good introduction.
How about Dinah on Zoom? She wanted to.
Oh, sure.
Dinah?
Oh, yes. I thought that he did a really great job of making the concept feel very current and relevant, but with all of the examples, you know, did you check the weight of the chair before you sat down? Do you have a piece of artwork that you just despise for some reason? I thought that was really great.
These examples, great. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Warren, I promise you.
no problem. The organization of the speech was great. We had the beginning, the body, and the summary.
Organization, yeah. Peter, why don't you go next?
So I'm going to refer to it as breaking the fourth wall, but AKA speaking off the cuff. So for example, he pointed to the artwork on the side of the stage here, which in essence took away from what he had written coming into his speech.
Yep. Spontaneous, yeah. It's a really good, some of the most memorable lines are ones done off the cuff.
He added humor to the speech, so which also kept us engaged.
Yeah. Anyone else on Zoom?
I think I really like how Bruce paused in the correct time when he's waiting for us to give some thoughts from ourselves and also to pay more attention to specific sentence you want to highlight.
Go already, Lisa. Sandy.
Actually, it seemed like he was very comfortable in front of the audience.
Yes,
Good pacing.
and it appears comfortable, right? I like the analogy of you see ducks swimming across the water and they look so calm and serene. If you had an underwater camera, their little feet are going like this at 90 miles an hour. It's anything but. So it doesn't matter how you feel inside. It's what Prince doing. Anyone in here that hasn't gone? I think we've got everyone. Oh, sorry.
I actually really like Bruce's ending. He kept us looking forward for the next speeches.
Okay.
He said it was only the intro.
Ending left us hanging, left us wanting more. And anyone on Zoom that we haven't got yet? Okay, you don't have to. Let's just stop there. Can you look at the breadth of that list? How many of you thought that list was a lot longer and covered a lot more things than you thought it was gonna? I mean, I did, and I've been doing this for a long time, right? Look at how many different things you can talk about. Bruce, how do you feel seeing that people liked all those things about your speech?
It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool because there are things that I was deliberately going for and things that I wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's.
Yeah,
it's cool to see.
sometimes there's accidental reinforcements, and sometimes there's acknowledgement of hard work that you went into there. So I want you to think about this when you're doing evaluations. There are all kinds of things. There's all kinds of different views of the speaker that you can do it from. If you ever do speech contests, those are interesting, evaluation contests, those are interesting. Because you might think, oh yeah, you want to do 3 things because it's short on time, so you're going to do exactly 3 things, right? And you might want to pick the 3 most noticeable ones. But you're in a contest. Chances are everybody else is going to do those 3, right? So you want to go from numbers maybe 3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, and 6 on the most ones in here. And maybe you want to just make, oh, we could talk about his vocal variety. It's slipped up just a little bit, or though it was really strong. But more importantly, let's get to this thing here. And then, so yes, I saw it. I am a good evaluator, but here's some other things to talk about. And you think if people give evaluations, they tend to hear the same things over and over again. So going a little bit further down your list can give you a stronger evaluation. You have to make the judgment on the speaker. It's a car backing up outside. All right. So how about another round of applause for Bruce? The lesson is lots of things to talk about, lots of things to enforce, and you never know which thing you enforce is going to make a difference for the speaker. You might talk about something that they never even thought of themselves that way of having done, and you might open up a whole new window for them. All right. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the middle one, the constructive criticism. And getting constructive criticism our whole life, and so you think that's one you're most comfortable with. But one of the things I want you to think about is it constructive? Am I saying something that they can do something about? I've heard people talk about the way the speaker was dressed. There's nothing they can do about it. They're kind of out of the bounds of what you should talk about. You're talking about the speech itself, not the speaker, right? And so don't talk about things they can't change. Be careful about talking about how they pronounce things. Maybe that English isn't their native language. And I've heard excellent speeches where the grammar was wrong, the words were wrong, but the content was so compelling that it overrode all of that. And so, think about, don't make them self-conscious about things that they can't easily fix and focus on the things that they can. So look for something that will make their speech better, but you've got to tell them what it is, why it's important, and some things they could do differently the next time. And occasionally you'll find a really good speaker and you can't really think of anything that they did wrong, but you can talk about, say, hey, you did this way, and here's another way you could have done it, which might have helped in a different situation. So no matter how good they are as a speaker, you can always find something constructive to say. Oh, if you're giving this on a bigger stage, if you're ever in a position to give this on a bigger stage, instead of having your gestures down here, make sure your gestures go way up here and lean towards the audience and things like that. So think about what they could do better, why is it important, and what you're suggesting they could do about it for the constructive criticism. And just make sure you're talking about something that's fair to them. Lisa, can you introduce the next speaker?
Sure. Before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to thank Alan again for being our facilitator. That was terrific, Alan. Thank you very much. We all got here to absorb it, or as Bruce said, glom on. How do you like that? I was listening. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Barbara Seymour, our second speaker. Barbara's speech is entitled My Friend's Quest for a Turkey Dinner. It's a speech from the Presentation Mastery Pathway, Level 1, Option 2, called Introduction to Variety. It's a 5 to 7 minute speech. Barbara Seymour, my friend's quest for a turkey dinner. Let's welcome her to the stage.
So I know it's not Thanksgiving, but why did the turkey cross the road? Anybody? To prove it wasn't chicken. So tonight I'm going to tell you a story that happened while I was cycling with a friend of mine. Now I want to give you a mental image of my friend because she's, we'll say mid-60s. She's about my height because it's a little relevant to the story. Now my friend likes to bike, but she doesn't like to bike on busy roads and she doesn't like to go fast. So when she says, let's go for a ride, usually I'll plan a ride somewhere through Dover, Sudbury, on these very, very untraveled back roads. And it allows us to bike side to side and then talk the entire time. Actually, she talks the entire time because she really loves to tell stories. Now, last summer, we were biking and we had to stop because there was a big gang of turkeys crossing the road. And as we waited, she said to me, you know, I tried to catch one of those one time for dinner. She said, I see them all the time in my yard. She lives near the Audubon. She says, one time, one got into our garage and we could hear something in the garage. We didn't know what it was. And when my husband went to look, it really startled him. Now, she didn't say the turkey did any damage. So I thought this was kind of an interesting story. So I had to ask some questions. So I said, Janji, her name, what did you do to try to catch turkey? Did you have a BB gun? Did you buy a shotgun? She said, no guns. She said, I tried to create a trap, like a mouse trap. She said, we have a very big cage downstairs. So my husband brought it up and I propped it up on a stick and I threw some oatmeal thinking the turkeys would walk into the cage, knock the stick down and get trapped in the cage. She said, I waited 1 week. I waited 2 weeks, no turkeys. So I had to ask, Johnny, was it turkey hunting season? Did you have a license? She waved me off, said, no, it's my yard. So she said, next, we have big rain barrels. She said, I thought if I could put a ramp, the turkeys would go up the ramp and fall into the barrel. So she says, so I took some seeds and I put the seeds on the ramp. And the next morning when I went out, I saw the squirrels and chipmunks eating all the seeds. So then she goes, then I did some research. She says, I found that turkeys really like cracked corn. So I went to Home Depot, got some cracked corn, threw some in the garage, thinking the turkeys would wander in. And when they were in, I would shut the door, chop them inside. Now I had to ask, Johnji, say a turkey did wander in, how are you going to catch it? Don't you know they have very sharp talons, very sharp beaks? I would not mess with a turkey. She goes, no. I wasn't going to catch it. I have a very big knife and I was going to take the knife and chase it and then chop off his head. Now, I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, Johnji, did you grow up on a farm and never tell me? She said, no. I said, have you ever killed a chicken or a turkey? She said, no. I said, so you've never killed a turkey, you've never gutted one, you've never plucked one. What were you going to do with this? And she got very quiet. And I think she had an aha moment, realizing had she actually captured a turkey and contained it, the actual butchering part probably hadn't crossed her mind. However, since we talk recipes all the time, she did tell me that she was going to prepare it as soup only because, you know, wild turkey is not going to be very tender. So before our ride ended that day, she actually told me of yet another story. And this one occurred when she was jogging down the Charles River in Cambridge. Now, if you've ever been in Cambridge, stuck on Memorial Drive, you'll know that there's tons and tons of Canadian geese out there, Canada geese. She said, one day I was jogging and there were so many of these geese and they're so fat. It seemed like a waste not to catch one. So she said, I really thought that I would just grab him by the neck, break the neck, shove it under my arm and get and keep jogging. She said, I didn't because I was afraid people would think I was crazy. Jogging down the road with a dead goose under my arm. So now, when I finished writing this story, I did have to think for a moment, and you can make your own opinions. Perhaps she is a little crazy, but I can tell you, I'm sure that's why we're friends. That's it. Thank you.
Do something different for this stage. I'm gonna have you break up into groups of 3 or 4. There's 4 of you on Zoom. So you guys are gonna be in one group together and go into a breakout room. And you guys are gonna get first pick of these. So one is gestures, body language. 2 is organization and flow. The third one is emotion. Probably the hardest one. It's the one we are the worst at talking about in Toastmasters. And the fourth group, if you don't want one of those 3, you go there, you guys have to figure out what you're going to talk about. I want you to talk about something similar, all of you, but you can leave that to your breakout room. People on Zoom, do you want to pick one, and then maybe the first one that says something will get the choice for everybody. So there's your motivation to speak up quickly. Anyone?
Can you reread the topics?
Okay, gestures and body language. Oh, sorry, and vocal variety, sorry. Kind of the basics. This is organization and flow of the speech. This one is use of emotion. And the last one is, you guys can decide.
I'd vote organization for us, just to not take the very first one. If anyone on Zoom wants anything different, say your piece now.
One once, one twice, gone. How many people would like to do over gestures and vocal variety?
Can I just divide the group up and then?
Well, I was gonna have like the first 3 or 4 people that want to do that, go up to the room upstairs, maybe.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you're interested in that, just
Who wants to talk about vocal variety, body language, and gestures?
okay.
Stacy, all right.
Jonathan, Bruce,
Jonathan,
and Warren. Okay,
okay.
okay, we've got 4.
All right. And
No,
here.
you not fast enough. So, okay,
And-
so that's this one's taken. How many would like to do emotion?
No.
Okay, those 2. Sandy and Tyler, okay, why don't you guys do the back corner, and then the rest of you get to do this corner, these 4 chairs here. And just get to decide what you're gonna do.
So they can do any of it, right?
You can't do these 3, you can do anything you want, but not those 3.
Oh, it's a free space, like bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah, free space. So, okay, so 4 of you back there, other 4 up here.
No, I just mean, any other direction about what we're talking about, or just
I know,
talking
Well,
about?
we're looking for constructive criticism, so what they could do differently,
What is
why it's
emotion?
important,
Yeah, emotion.
and
Right.
what they can do about it.
I think you are going.
I know, I'm just trying to.
Stoic,
Yeah.
I don't have.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go through each group once, and if we've got enough time, we're gonna go through each group twice. But I'm gonna have each group, what I'd like you to tell me is what you want to give constructive criticism about, why it's important, and what they can do better. So why don't we start with the people from upstairs? You came from, well, second farthest away, but one of you want to present your,
Come on, participant.
whatever works best for you.
So we thought that we could offer when doing dialogue. So two things to improve on that would be facing different directions for each of the speakers. So always, when speaking from her own point of view, facing one direction, one side of the room, and then when speaking from the other friend's point of view, face the other direction, the other side of the room, or just slight movement.
Yep.
And then also could do the voices possibly in a little bit of a different way, her own
Right.
voice, and maybe like a little bit of a different type of voice.
All right, so that's good at what you're talking about and how to do it better. Why is it important?
Because it would help people really distinguish, right? Between the two.
Excellent. Who is talking? Yeah.
Can you read those to us so we could hear on Zoom a little bit? Because it's hard to hear Stacy in the mic.
The what was dialogue, how to do dialogue better. And why, because it helps you distinguish who is speaking. And the two suggestions they had for ways to do that is face different directions when you're talking one speaker and another direction when you're talking other speaker. Maybe you say, one voice when you're talking this way, a deeper voice this way. That kind of thing. Excellent. Have a round of applause for that. The court talks about a third method. If you need to do a narration, you can lean out this way and people somehow figure out that this is one speaker, this is the other speaker, and this is the narrator. Use your normal voice for narration and higher and lower for the other. Excellent. People on Zoom. What was one of yours?
So I'm designated speaker, but I think we might have misunderstood the assignment. We focused on positives exclusively. Are we looking for areas of opportunity? Is that right?
This was the constructive criticism. This was the middle layer.
Constructive criticism. Okay, no, that's fine. I can switch one of ours up. So as a positive, we really liked what we're calling the vignettes, the areas of how is this friend going to kill this turkey. That they were enjoyable. Area for improvement or criticism would be summing that up again potentially at the end. We had these really nice maybe 3 different vignettes, but wrapping them up and potentially going back and reflecting on each of them was a nice way to drive them home to help the audience retain information as far as the why. And then we're looking for examples to remedy for the future. Is that right?
Oh, okay. But I thought you kind of covered that with summarizing at the end. But, yeah. Do you have another one?
Another one, again, on the fly. Since we were focusing on positives, we really loved the opening and that kind of focus on asking a question, but having additional engagement would be nice.
Just doing one for everybody right now. So save that one for a minute from now. The group that was in the back. Which one did you guys?
For us,
Emotion, yes.
emotions. So I'm gonna build on what was said for the first one, which was dialogue, but building on top of that, I'm gonna talk about reliving, not retelling, or AKA method acting. So for example, in the middle of her speech, she mentioned, for example, going for a run with a turkey under her arm, right? And what I think would have been more effective there is if she had distinguished both characters through personification. So for example, she could have said something like, "Are you really gonna go for a run with a turkey under your arm? Why wouldn't I? What's so crazy about that?" So more vocal variety, in essence, more emotional impact through personification, and really allowing us to be inside the head of both characters, if that makes sense. It's really hard to describe, but that's kind of what I would say.
Okay, and why is it important?
Because then as an audience, we can see ourselves in each character.
So helps involve the audience, engage the audience.
But also would display the emotions through the personification and variety, the speeches and vocal variety.
So I missed the beginning, said the first few again.
I'm saying that it will expose the emotions
Okay.
that are coming through.
I want to say that trying to look at emotion is, I think, one of the hardest things
Yep.
to constructively critique during speech.
I agree. Emotion is far and away the hardest of everything. In my formal Toastmasters, they don't talk about emotion at all. The group that was up here, what did you decide to talk about?
We, anybody else can jump in, but basically we talked about, we have a small area here and we wanted to make sure that it didn't look like the person was pacing at the front. So part of that is when you're talking about different time frames, like for the different stories, is to start from the left, go to the middle and the right, or vice versa. Somehow make it flow chronologically so the audience is involved in following you in the space you have provided.
Okay, why is it important?
Timeline, if you're doing a flashback, you could start at one end and then jump back to the other end of the stage.
Yeah.
And at one point, we weren't sure whether one of her stories was earlier than the other.
Yeah.
And we realized that that would help clear that.
It allows you to block the stage.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because you talk about one area or one location, you stop talking one part of the stage and you go over here and talk here. You want to refer, you can point over to there and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. That's fantastic. Time-wise. Okay, we're supposed to be in our break now. Let's do a 10-minute break until 8:15. Is that enough
So
time?
that's fine. I think somebody go upstairs and help Stacy bring stuff down.
Yeah.
And
Next part is possibly the hardest part of doing the evaluation. How do you say something that will make the speaker want to give the speech again? And there's many things you can do. You can talk about, you can go over the things they did well and just say, we want to hear more of it. That's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly strong way of doing it. You can talk about an area or a place where they could give that, if you went to retirement homes and gave that to, people who have had cardiac events, that might be a really interesting story for them, It helps you know a little bit about the speaker and if that sort of thing is possible. It also helps if you know something about the speaker and what their goals are, tell them how they can take that in the other goal. But I maintain that probably the most effective thing you can say about someone's speech is to tell them how it hit you emotionally. How did it affect you? And maybe relate it, what are you going to do different with the information? Or how did that open up how you're thinking about other things? Or what did you learn about how you could be a better speaker? Anything like that, just to say, this speech touched me personally. End of the day, I believe that's why we're all speaking, is we want to get up there and give our message and have it impact people. So hearing how the speech impacted just you, it's fine. Or you can say, I was looking around the audience, I saw everyone was laughing. I saw someone nearly fall out of their chair. Things like that all helps. But think about how you can say something really personal. And the finer a point you put on it, the better. Like, I see a lot of speakers that say, oh, that was the best speech I've ever heard. You know what? It doesn't really mean a lot, right? especially if the next time you give an evaluation, you say, oh, that was the best speech I ever heard. Well, just the first person probably just took everything away from them. Okay, this is just something I say. It's like, have a nice day. You know, do they mean that or not? Are they literally paid to say that to every customer? Right? So the finer a point you can put on it, the harder it lands. So think about what you can say and how you can say it to make it land. Chris, do you want to introduce our third speaker?
Sure. I have the pleasure of introducing our last speaker of the night, Kristen Culver. She also has a DTM and she's visiting us from outside the club. Her speech title is A Tale of Two Mentees, not manatees, mentees. Kristen Culver has been a Toastmaster over 9 years. She earned a DTM in June of 2020 from the Legacy program. That was the one with manuals, I believe. And if you wanted to visit her other clubs, they also run hybrid meetings. One is located near Boston called Advanced Access, and she's also in the JP Toastmasters. Now, Kristen wrote in her intro, I've never been a mom, except I have 2 fur babies, Boris and Natasha. Kristen actually took on mentoring 2 Toastmasters at the same time. She figures it's sort of like raising 2 children close in age. They both have specific needs, but they can be quite different. Tonight, Kristen is going to share with us the first part of her journey as a Toastmaster mentor, because it's a journey that's still ongoing. Let's welcome Kristen Culver to the front of the room.
Fellow Toastmasters, you know the beginning of, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. How very carefully the writer tells you about 2 very different things, but it's the same place at the same time. Mentoring people when it just turns out that I couldn't say no, who have very different needs, was an interesting challenge that grew me in the process. The first mentee, he needs help with structure, organization. He was frustrated he never quite finished his goals. And I realized what was happening was he didn't have structure. And what I suggested to him was something called the SMART goal. If you don't know what it is, Google it. It's an acronym. Each letter stands for a part of the system. Things such as being specific, time sensitive, having a deadline, and so forth. He'd never heard of it before. So it was great because it gave him a chance to research it a little and get back to me with questions. I wanted to make sure I wasn't telling him what to do, but more things he could try and to see which ones worked and which didn't. As we would meet once a month virtually, I wanted to check in with him as an accountability buddy, but I didn't want him to think I was his buddy. I was there to kind of keep an eye on his progress. And when he wasn't making progress, ask him why he thought that was. What could he do differently? What was working and what wasn't? Over time, what he realized was he wasn't allowing himself focus. I have ADHD. I have to turn off all the buzzers, all the lights, all the notifications, and set a timer when I want to focus for like a half hour, writing or practicing a speech or any other task. While he may not have the same situation, that technique can be very useful. I showed him how I did it, what app I used, and he implemented it and was so happy when he got back to me the next month saying, oh my gosh, I've already got my speech written, I've practiced it a couple times, and I'm ready to present it in front of my club. Good job. I want to hear how it goes. definitely tell me or show me the evaluation from your speaker evaluator when you meet with me next. As he grew more confident, he needed me less, which is fine. This was like a 3-month assignment. That's what I was understanding. But what I liked was that he would come back with questions. He'd want to dig deeper. And I love that natural curiosity. You don't see that in everyone. Sometimes people are very hesitant. They don't want to push. They don't want to rock the boat. I like the fact that he was willing to learn, challenge himself, and even make mistakes. That's a sign of a really good Toastmaster. Other mentee, he's very, very different. He wanted to learn table topics. He hated them. Hated them. I love table topics. That's my jam. I knew I had to save his soul in Toastmasters. We had to set up a very unique situation. He was very busy with work, but we would talk on WhatsApp. He had a computer program that generated random questions. So he would pull up a question while on the live feed, read it, step back, and give his answer. I would then take a minute to kind of write down some thoughts, evaluating his table talk. That's not something we normally do, but the skill does work and you should try it sometime. What I found was he would take what I suggested and he'd do one more question and he would apply what he learned almost immediately. I love that adaptability and the willingness to try things. Then he got smart. He'd send me a question. Now the pressure was on. I had to show him how I would answer my new random question. And I had to showcase all the skills, some of the things we talked about today about where was I standing on the stage, vocal variety, pacing, pitch, all of it, gestures, you name it. By the time 3 months had passed, I thought he wouldn't need me anymore. He was really good. No, when I gave him his little evaluation, kind of asking questions to see what did he accomplish his goal? Did he feel like he needed to work with me further? Or did he feel like he was okay? He's like, I feel like there's so much more I can learn from you. I'm like, oh, very flattered, but I think you're good. Unless there's something else about table topics you're not telling me that you need to work on. What I found was he was enjoying the process of having him be challenged and problem solve. He had to figure out how to set up a wireless microphone. He never used one of those before. We talked about lighting issues. We talked about virtual versus in person. So naturally, I visited his club at one point and realized that he got to have a stage, a raised stage. I'm like, oh, you can have so much fun with this. Not long after I did join his club because I had a need and my club was gone. And people started to notice he was patenting his style after me. Now, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I will say I'm flattered and honored that he seemed to think it was a good style. I love telling a good story. Now, the part I didn't tell you in the introduction, because it was told to me that it was actually not really pertinent to the speech this first time I was giving it, is I did something called the Meet Your Match program. And it was like speed dating, but for Toastmasters. And what I would love to encourage you all to do is think about, do you want to be a mentee? Or do you think you're ready to be a mentor? Because if either of those speak to your heart, I encourage you to consider being a mentor too. Just to talk about that.
Perfectly ambiguous. All right, give you a minute and a half to think about that. Do a group evaluation. A minute and a half. I want to talk about something that resonated with them in that speech. Sandy?
I loved her ending, how she challenged all of us to be either a mentor or a mentee. So and it was a challenge to the audience.
Yep. Oh, so again,
It was actually very inspiring. After her speech, I do want to sign up for a who had a mentor.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, I'm not.
Kristen, how does that feel when someone said,
That's actually what I live for, to hear that something I said made them want more.
Peter? Oh, sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, it's got me thinking about mentoring too, but the thing that I wanted to toss in there was that I've got this real intellectual side, so her opening really intellectually engaged me.
Wow. Someone from Zoom.
I would like to make a comment. Taking a step back and looking at the speech as a whole, I found myself so pulled into it that when you said we're going to analyze it, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I had to stop for a moment because I had been so engaged in it. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just totally entertained.
Yeah, which is, as a speaker, I like the evaluation, but boy, you hear something like that, that really, real solid compliment. Warren, and then,
Yeah, I like the way she mentioned how that person practiced table topics. I think that was really good.
what about about it?
I thought it was a novel idea that is good to. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah. Excellent. Sorry.
So I'm familiar with SMART goals also from work, but I never thought about actually thinking about applying it to personal life, and so I'm really glad we got that up, and I am already using it.
Can I ask if we can tell everybody what SMART is?
Oh, yeah, you want me to rattle them off?
Yeah.
That's specific. That means you need to have something quantifiable. Oh, well, I could get to that. Specific as in, not I just want to lose weight, but I want to, pass my next physical exam with flying colors. And then M would be the more measurable, quantifiable thing, 50 pounds or blood pressure below a certain level. A, that one's kind of fun. It's actionable. Remember we talked about having an actionable constructive feedback? That's exactly what that's talking about. What are you going to do? Are you going to go for walks? Are you going to change your diet? Whatever. That's an example. R is usually resource. Some people say realistic. It kind of varies from whichever methodology you're reading it from. I like resources. Know who or what your resources are. Do you have a mentor? Do you have supplies? Do you have a limitation on said supplies? Know what you're working with. And then T is time sensitive. Have you ever heard the saying, a goal without a deadline is just a dream? Mm-hmm. And also a task will expand to fit whatever time frame you give it. If I told you had 5 minutes to write up an evaluation or 20 minutes, you'd find that's a way to fill both of those, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. So that's what SMART acronym stands for. Now I've heard of also dumb goals, but that's a different thing entirely. That's totally different. But I find that yes, it can be applied both to work and.
Tyler.
I also liked how she used vocal variety and the stage in itself, putting yourselves in different place on the stage to distinguish the two mentees.
What about it spoke to you?
It just made a distinction that each of the mentees had a different goal in themselves and there are different tasks they wanted to accomplish.
It helped relate to the two different lessons. So, okay. Jonathan?
I enjoyed the stories of both of the mentees, and I loved the way she moved from one spot to the other.
Okay, someone else from Zoom. I'm patient. Someone else have something? You guys hear me?
Is it frozen?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, no, they can hear.
Yeah.
She was nodding.
Okay,
Most of what I thought has been covered, so.
Oh,
okay, fair enough. Anyone that hasn't gone?
I really liked how she told us what motivated each individual and how different they were, and then what challenged them as well. So it was a good contrast of two different individuals.
I loved how animated she was and she brought energy to the stage.
One more call to Zoom. Anyone else up there?
I thought the pacing was really good. It kept you engaged and, you know, she just kept it moving and she used the stage very well.
Lisa.
I think also Kristen had a way when she brought us into her descriptive stories and personalities that she actually motivated us at the same time. I guess that's a little bit of an emotional thing.
Yeah. Emotional motivation, okay. Maggie?
I think she targeted the right audience. I mean, the topic was just right on and very relatable. So everyone was paying attention because it was related to all of us.
Yeah. Room full of Toastmasters.
Know your audience.
Yeah. You?
Can I throw out two really quick, if that's okay?
I'm
Can I
sorry.
throw out 2 points really quick, if that's
I
okay?
think everyone's gone now. Have you gone yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
One, she built curiosity in the beginning of the speech. So any effective speech, you want to build curiosity in order to pull your audience in. So, for example, not only was the opening effective through the Tale of Two Cities, but also the SMART goals. So immediately we asked ourselves, like, what is she going to be talking about? Why am I invested, right? And I feel like the second point is a little too complex, but as I was breaking it down, I almost familiarize it, or I almost think about the hero's journey, right? So she has this call to action, which is to mentor others. She has a sage in the middle of her story, which is her mentees. And then in essence, she changes as well. So kind of like character change and development.
Yeah, for me, it was the middle of the story when she was talking about how it affected her, and she was almost tearing up as she was talking about how emotionally engaged she was in, and it just hit me right there. I love that part of it. What? Okay. Bruce?
I loved her display of emotion when she mentioned table topics and how the one mentee didn't like it or was struggling with it. Just it was really great.
Yeah.
Emotional expression, very expressive.
All right, just to check in with you, Kristen, how do you feel about all that feedback?
I was already planning on giving the speech again, but it really gives me encouragement that it's not repetitive or wasted. Like you said, being the right audience. Oh, we've heard that one before.
Oh, and knowing that it landed in so many different ways, that's, all right. So let me just summarize. So I think we all start out thinking that constructive feedback is the most important thing. And I hope I've convinced you that, I mean, it's not that it's not important, but out of the three things, I really feel like it's the least important. It's usually it's the most obvious things you can say, and so they could possibly figure it out for themselves, or they could possibly get that feedback from someone else, a lesser person than you. I have an ego the size of a planet, if you guys haven't figured that out yet. Then talking about all the things they do well. And you saw how long that list was. It's amazing the things that you can touch on that they might not have thought of that they were doing well, that actually made them a really good speaker. You know, some people sound so comfortable. It's like sitting across the table, having a conversation after a fine meal. And that's a nice thing to know. That's a nice thing to, but just know that they've got that effect. You know, what about the way I speak is landing?
Is it?
And that helps them hang on to those things as they're making changes. And the better you get, the more you want to hang on to the good things and just tweak the things you can do better. And also you'll find that the nice thing about going to advanced clubs and you hear the group evaluation, you'll go through somebody say, oh, that part of your speech really needs work. And then somebody else says, that part of the speech was my favorite part. Don't change a thing, right?
I love it when you get to repeat.
And you think, oh, well, that's useless. No, that's telling you that you're giving it to a diverse audience and some things land for one people who don't for other. And that's great information. Then how do you get that information without that? Okay, so that's the, and then the last one, motivating them. Tell how the speech landed on you. Give them some motivation to get doing that. Getting up and giving that next speech, going out there and working even harder on the next one. And that's the motivation. And if that's not landing, then the other two things are just words. They're just words. There's two things I'd like you to think about over and above all of this. One of them is that you don't have to just do it in your Toastmasters club. And you don't have to just do it about speeches. At work, we're in this feedback phase, and they want you to give, you know, a couple of things that you like about the person and a couple of things they could do better. That you can just, they really want just 2 or 3 bullet points from everybody. But when I do it, I give 3 things I like, one or 2 things that they could do a little bit better, and some kind of you know, keep doing what you're doing, or, you know, I love the fact that you do this, or you're the person I look to for this kind of thing. And it can turn people around. You know, people I worked with 5 years ago that came and said, at one time you made that comment, you know, that you changed how I approach that at work, right? Often you don't hear how these things land, but every now and then you do, and you can change somebody's life by what you say. And these are the kind of things that qualify for those. And so pay attention to it. You use it in your Toastmasters club, but consider using it at home. And just a smaller one, my first Toastmasters club, I had people come up and say, you know, I've been trying to get my husband to take the garbage out every week, and I feel like I'm nagging him all the time. And I did what you said. I went up and I just kind of talking to 2 or 3 things that I've done lately that I really, really liked, and then, you know, something else. And then I said, oh, and would you mind taking the garbage out? And after you set them up for the things you like, oh, of course, you know, somebody that thinks that highly of me, I don't want to lower their opinion of them. Of course, they'll take it. And so it just worked like a charm. And so, you know, you can use them in big ways and you can use them in small ways, but, you know, use your superpower for good and not evil, and let's go out there and change the world. Thank you. Any questions or anything that I didn't cover, or?
Aren't we lucky we have Alan in our club, huh?
Some of you heard my speech about being in the women's prison club. I learned so much from them. I felt I learned way more from them than they did for me. But you know, you go to Toastmasters meetings and you hear stories about other people, and you think of who are your friends? Your friends are the people you have the most shared stories with. And so, in some ways, you make deeper commitments to people in Toastmasters and people you know more about. There's a word, there's somebody I was in a meeting with him every day for 3 years, and then he joined the Toastmasters club, and 6 months later I knew 100 times more than I had in the first 3 years working with him. We don't often connect. Social media connects a little bit, but not fully. And coming here and hearing people's stories and giving them positive feedback and telling them what they're doing well and motivating each other to get out there. It's like reaching over and grabbing each other's shoelaces and pulling. And physics says nothing should happen. We should just all stay in the same place. But somehow we find ourselves floating above, oh, that's Mount Everest down there, that tiny little thing. Right? It's left us all forward. And the stronger the speakers are around you, the stronger the feedback they're giving you, the stronger you are. So you're making the people around you stronger, strengthens you. Anyways, I can go on for a couple hours. Because TTM, don't time me.
Thank you, Alan. First of all, I want to thank everybody for participating fully. How many people felt that this workshop was well worth it? Raise your hand. Good. I'd like to try to do it again in a few months, but maybe this time instead of members only, and we will need a crew to help us, let's do it for the public. We can still do it in person and on Zoom, and we might get people to find out about our club, but the goal is to share the information with the public. And on Zoom, did you get a lot out of it?
Yeah, it was great. And I had a question for Alan.
Okay.
I just wanted to understand that usually during evaluations, I've noticed both Alan and Peter come up with techniques that they use as reference. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about where do they go look for these techniques? Are there resources? How can we learn a little bit more about these techniques and probably use them when we are writing down our speeches and probably implement them?
There's a variety of resources out there. I'm not sure if any of you heard Darren LaCroix, who was at CLCon. I didn't hear him this time, but I heard him speak 4 or 5 times. He's awesome. But when he was learning to be a speaker, he said, yeah, he went to the Bible. And he said, well, not the, I mean, maybe you could get in the Catholic Bible, but there's how to be a public speaker, the Bible of public speaking. You can buy it from Amazon. And there's actually 3 or 4 books with that title in. They're all pretty decent and they're all full of things to try. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of Kaizen, like read through the table of contents, pick one that kind of catches your eye, read that a little bit, and then go try it. And then a couple of weeks later, go back, rinse and repeat. And if you evolve 1% as a speaker every week, you know, in 6 years, you'll be 10 times better than you are right now. 1% of the time takes you a long way. Did I answer your question?
Yep. Thank you so much, Alan. And this was wonderful. Thank you once again.
Also, I'm Ruth, if a lot of times when I listen to evaluations, I'm taking notes because I'm learning the style or how the evaluator is evaluating a certain speech. And I do that with Peter, and I do that with Ginny, and I do it with Alan. We have really accomplished speakers in our club, and from my point of view, we're learning from each other. And I think that's important, is to not feel that the takeaway should be that you're always going to learn, and making mistakes is okay. It's a safe place. Or giving an evaluation that you didn't think was so great. The person might have thought it was terrific, or give another evaluation another time and try again. Because that's really the hardest part of Toastmasters, is the evaluations. Most of us are terrified of hurting somebody's feelings, but you don't have to hurt anybody's feelings with the Oreo cookie approach and with what we learned tonight. And I also want to thank everybody who was involved in making this a success. And certainly Stacy outdid herself. I added some little things, but boy, If I ever have a party that needs a caterer, I'm going to you. And I like the fact that we rolled with the punches. You guys didn't know it, but our meeting room upstairs is now turned into a fundraiser auction thing. So we had to find another place, and I think we did fine. And thank you for attending on Zoom. I'm really glad. And how are we doing on time, Mr. Warren Lord?
Very good.
Very good. Are we on cue?
Yeah, 10 minutes early.
All
That's
right.
good.
That's about it for my wrap up. What we're gonna do is, I'm gonna take pictures of this and type them up so we all have it. And I've asked a few people who were here to take notes today and also put their own notes on it, because I promised Barbara and Bruce that they would have a written evaluation so that they can get credit in their pathways. And Kristen, I'm gonna write yours up too, but I mean, why
And if
not?
anyone has any constructive feedback, I could use that too. So send it to Lisa and she'll send it on to me, because that's
Okay.
only the third iteration, and I haven't done it with Leadly, just to see what kind of feedback it gave me. It was actually kind of interesting. So I haven't tried that app yet. Definitely give that a shot.
Okay. Yes, Aggie.
Lisa, can I actually ask Kristen, I know that the sign up for the
Matching.
matching.
Carol
installation-
Matoff is the one who is coordinating the Meet Your Match program, and the speed networking thing that she
Right.
does is, I think she's in every 6 months. I'm not
I think
100%
so.
sure, but definitely reach out to her, because in the interim, she may still have people who are still looking to be matched up and could still facilitate that.
Okay, so I will just grab information and pass it to the class if someone is interested.
I think
will pass
it's also on the District 31
And
website.
if you're gonna
Yes,
do
it
that,
is.
don't forget to take advantage of the mentoring module in Pathways. There's actually a couple of speeches that you can give and work your way through the module. And that counts towards, I think it's the Pathfinder, not necessarily your DCP point, but it doesn't count towards Pathfinder. So just FYI, on useful things. That's all.
Okay, everybody,
Right. No,
Thank
should be
you.
try to do so. Find yourself information. FYI. Find
Yes.
yourself information.
Aggie, I'm gonna close out the meeting
Yes,
unless you want to
absolutely.
say.
Close the meeting and